Thank you all for being here. We appreciate your coming out, and being with us today, and yeah, we go around and introduce the folks on the board. Like to start, Harold?
Okay, Harold Weinbrecht, Mayor of Karen.
TJ Colley, Mayor of Morrisville.
I'm Ronnie Kern, Mayor of Rosehill.
Mark Bell, Mayor of Hillsborough.
Javier Caballero with Durham City Council.
Triangle West.
Karen Howard, Chatham County Chair of C.
I'm Vivian Jones, Mayor of Wake Forest.
Chris Lucasino with Campo.
Gilmore Vance, Mayor Pro Tem Garner.
Susan Evans, Chair, Wake County Board of Commissioners.
Michael Parker, Go Triangle.
Marilyn Carter, Orange County Commissioners.
Matt Hughes, Hillsborough Commissioner.
Melissa McCullough, Chapel Hill Town Council.
Thank you all for being here, and thank you for all, well, back on that table. How about?
Okay, sure. Joe Malazzo with RTA.
Tracy Fairdency, DOT Division 5.
Eric Vitale, City of Durham.
Michael Rayner with TPD. Phil Gary, same.
Julie Bogle, Heidi Grable, Citizen.
Let's introduce everybody else that's here too.
Douglas Parker with Finish.
Bill Leslie with Finish.
Matt Clark, NCDOT Division 4. James Owens, NCDOT Division 4.
Becca Gallus, NCDOT Division. Shelby Powell with Campo.
Tim Berger, Wake County.
Michelle Siegel, Morrisville.
David Miller, Triangle West.
Scott Saylor, Advisor to Johnston County.
Matt Day, Central Pines Regional Council.
Philip Satyan, Triangle West.
Yambin John, Triangle West.
Daniel Spruill, Campo.
Jennifer Woodrow, Campo.
Holly McGee, Triangle West.
Evan Koff, Campo.
Sarah Keach, Campo.
Jacob Irving, Campo.
Caleb Allred, Campo.
Ben Howell, Campo.
Kara Russell, Campo.
Mike Crawford Camp.
Kenneth Ritchie, City of Raleigh.
And Owens, Campo.
Smottering and Waller, Triangle West.
Thank you all for being here. We appreciate your giving us your time for this important meeting together. Do we have people signed up for public comment?
Yes, Madam Chair. First speaker is, I think it's Heidi Grable. Did I say that right?
Yes. You have 3 minutes to speak, Heidi. Thank you. Just stand right.
Okay. Good morning, and thank you for my thoughts this morning to you, the joint Campo Triangle West TPO board meeting. My name is Heidi Grable. I am a lifelong resident of Durham County. I am here to represent the thousands of property owners in Durham and Person County who strongly oppose this rail to trail plan for the following reasons. And we have submitted over 1,000 signed opposition letters, and there are still residents who are calling me to sign this also because they've heard of this. The existing layout of roads and property boundaries and house placement are completely opposite of the principles to be applied by the crime prevention through environmental design. There's not much that can change about that. The dishonest grant study dated December 21st, 2023, and sent to Washington, D.C. by the City of Durham and approved by Secretary Pat Buttigieg in the U.S. Department of Transportation, contained false information for the request of federal funds for the Rail to Trail project. The project has never been a local community-led initiative, but instead proposed by government organizers. The thousands of citizens who live on or in close proximity to the projected rail to trail are outraged that the decision for the project has been approved without consent by the landowners directly affected. Residents living within a 5-mile radius were not contacted directly. Opposition to the trail due to environmental hazards of the soil and water for the residents of Durham and Person County and Wake County because of the toxic waste, which contains lead, arsenic, and heavy metals because of the disturbance of the removal of the abandoned railroad timbers and steel, These life-threatening issues will affect humans, wildlife, trees, woodlands, and wetlands, which include the rivers and streams that feed our necessary reservoirs. The dangers placed on the ecosystem, which includes forests, lakes, ponds, and many rivers and streams that flow into the Neuse River Basin, pose harm through flooding and environmental diseases. The removal of the old railroad timbers, the impervious surface violations, and the destruction of the mature hardwood trees will cause drainage and irreversible destruction. The removal of the groups of longstanding trees harms the remaining trees through root disruption, increased heat, and many other issues that also affect the bird and wildlife. The violation of the habitats for many of the animals, plants, reptiles, and aquatic life which live along the 26-mile forested railroad track, the removal of the mature trees, road timbers, and railroad steel risk the habitats for many species that are treasured in North Carolina, which we brag about. The lack of acknowledgement of the history of the Saponi Indians of Person County, who also resided in North Durham County. The Saponi Indians hunted, lived, and fished among the abandoned railroad tracks between Durham and Roxborough. Artifacts of the Indians are found in the fields and woods adjacent to the railroads, unused railroad tracks. The destruction of private property of thousands of landowners adjacent to the unused railroad tracks that are barely visible due to the mature trees and woodlands. The landowners have not been involved or adequately informed about the trail or the resulting property damage. Our solution to this, our solution is to stop immediately the funding on the rail to trail linking Durham and Roxborough. Our alternate route is to create a different trail, could be called the 501 trail, along the highway right-of-way that will make an exercise path bike trail along the existing 501 highway linking Durham and Person counties. This would have places for parking, all the amenities that are desired, but also would be better monitored by law enforcement, police, fire, and ambulances. The 501 trail would be monitored on a 24-hour basis, and this would save the taxpayers millions of dollars for maintenance, trash removal, and repairs. We hope that you will consider our requests.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Marilyn Carter.
Marilyn Carter.
You said you were speaking.
Just sign down.
Oh, okay. Is there?
That's all I have, Madam
That's all you have? Okay. Right?
Oh, okay.
Okay. And we will go to the introduction and meeting purpose. Chris and Doug are going to do this.
know we have a lot of familiar faces around the table and in the room today, but it's always good to have a reminder or for the new folks. Campo and formerly DCHC, but now Triangle West TPO boards have been working together to provide for regional transportation planning and programming decision-making for a multimodal transportation vision for almost 30 years now. I think the first joint MPO board meeting was in the early 2000s and has taken place almost every single year, once or twice a year since then. I think there have been very few years where these two boards have not gotten together. I think probably the crown jewel, if you will, in that effort is a jointly coordinated development of the metropolitan transportation plans for the two MPOs. You're going to get a presentation about that a little bit later. I think that's the next agenda item, actually. Ongoing coordination every other year for the submission of projects to the statewide prioritization process to help implement that shared regional vision for the triangle. So you all are part of a very long and hopefully continuing for a long time effort to ensure that the greater Research Triangle region has a solid transportation vision for the future and that it gets implemented.
Thank you all for being here today. We're in an era of a lot of disruption and unpredictability, and meetings like this are a testament to progress we can attain when we come together. Our constituents don't want us to just work together. They require it. And that doesn't just mean our MPOs, but also all of our member communities and our stakeholders. So with that, I thank you very much for being here and enjoy our presentations.
Next, we'll have discussion 2055.
Yeah, and we'll roll right into it. So the next item on the agenda, I think it has two parts. The first is just a presentation or level set for where we're at in the Metropolitan Transportation Plan development. We are getting very close to landing that airplane on the runway for the 2055 effort. And then also an opportunity to have any discussion about that planning effort and maybe even what some next steps are. And then the next item on the agenda after that will be to talk about the Joint Strategic Rail Infrastructure Study. I believe both boards have now had individual presentations on that. So this will focus more on some of the next steps that can be taken together to help implement that strategic effort. So for the MTP, I think there's really four things for this item. First, we're going to talk about the foundations, those key drivers, highlight some of those shared regional investments that I think are important for the broader Triangle region, and then open up the discussion at the end of that. Go ahead. So big picture, where are we? We are in the little orange on top of the yellow column there, which has slowly moved its way from the left side to the right side of both the screen and the column that we're highlighting there, the preferred option. We are scheduled for, I believe, consideration of the first of a two-step approval process for each board in November. That's right, Doug, right? You guys are in November or you're in October?
I did it yesterday.
Oh, you did it already. Well, fantastic. So Campo will hopefully quickly catch up at their November board meeting. And that first adoption step is to adopt the projects and programs that are included in the plan. We'll come back in January and February for final approval once we've gone through the required air quality conformity analysis and regulatory reviews that will need to happen for the MTP. You can go to the next slide. One of the things that we wanted to highlight was that the Metropolitan Transportation Plan is part of and grounded in our shared transportation policy priorities. And so many of you that have been on the board for a few years are familiar with these, but the policy priorities, if you don't know about them, we'll run through a few of them here for you that I think are applicable to the plan. And these are also available on both MPO's websites. Go ahead. So some of those policy priorities where I think the MTP really comes into play is in the investment for success, in making it North Carolina a leader in active transportation investments, and in strengthening support for demand management and technology. And you'll hear about all of those through the rest of this presentation. Some of the sort of secondary policy priorities that we touch on are making transportation investments more reliable and predictable. That's really talking about the revenue, making sure that we have the revenue available over time for the things that we think are important and are needed to implement and support our quality of life. Enable cost-effective critical corridor investments. We have a lot of shared corridors, both roadway and transit today and in the future, and ensuring that we have sound investments that we can implement within those corridors is going to be key to a smooth transportation network of the future. Removing barriers, particularly for smaller towns and rural areas. Both MPOs have some rural areas within their boundaries. We also have neighbors to our north and all around us, to our north and south, east and west, that also have critical needs today and in the future. And I think it's important for us to continue to help support those areas in ensuring they get what they need as well. And then the last bullet point there, recognizing statewide projects in all modes. That is specifically related to the statewide prioritization or STI law. where many modes, especially bike, ped, and transit, do not have the ability to compete for statewide mobility level funding. Next slide. So how are we investing for success? The MPOs look at what we would, I guess, define as our fair share of a lot of the NC First Commission recommendations, which, you know, at a highest level, I think you can think about those as perhaps injecting a little more flexibility into the STI law and how the funding flows through the STI law, which is pretty rigid right now. It also, you know, our MTPs include the addition of regional revenue at varying degrees, anywhere from a half cent or a quarter cent up to a whole cent assumption in our financial plans to help support the needs that are at the local road level in particular, and that are most critical to our local jurisdictions and our local communities. Next slide. So our preferred scenario includes several shared regional investments, a few of which we're going to highlight here in a little bit later, but one of the ones I think in particular, which is of note, is the Triangle Bikeway project. This is a bicycle and pedestrian project that will, you know, I think I've heard it described as the interstate of the bicycle and pedestrian network, or the backbone in the triangle. This is under sections of this are under project development and specifically design and NEPA right now, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to highlight it. We have multiple transit projects that span the triangle as well. But you know, this is a project that is going through design fully at the local level. So I thought it was interesting to note here. Also, with our assumptions about future land use, using our opportunity places land use scenario that has increasing mixed use, transit oriented, and walkable land uses throughout the region, even beyond what existing locally adopted plans include. So it is saying we are recognizing everyone's existing locally adopted plans, but in certain areas also challenging the local jurisdictions to maybe go a little bit more beyond what they've even considered so far. So that's a to-do in the plan that will come back in a few years and see how we're doing. Then increasing funding for active transportation investments. Again, some of that's linked to some of the NC First Commission recommendations, but it's also in assumptions we make about any new local revenue or regional revenue that we would realize in the future. Next slide. Our preferred scenario also, I touched on this a little bit a moment ago, but it looks at looking at and continuing to expand our use of the Regional Transportation Choices Program, our TDM program, and technology to help improve not just our ability to handle growing traffic, but also addressing safety as we move forward. Both MPOs have recently gone through safety plan development for each MPO and are going to be very busy, and you'll hear a little bit about this later today, working on the implementation of those safety plan recommendations. So a couple of important key meetings coming up in a few months, and staff will talk to you about that here a little bit later. You can go to the next slide. So moving into what are those key drivers for our future plan. There's sort of two sides to that. The first is what land use assumptions we make and what our choices are for the future of how we're going to grow. And the second is on the transportation side. What are those transportation networks? What are those transportation investments that we're going to make to help support that future growth? It was about a year and a half ago, right about a year and a half ago. You all had two joint board meetings, one in January and one in May, where we walked through the development of future growth scenarios for the Triangle region. and that was in January, I think, of 24. And then in May of 2024, we brought back the results. So as a reminder, there were 5 different scenarios that we looked at. I think a few of these actually had like an A, B, and C sub scenario, but really 5 different scenarios. One that was transit focused, one that was equity focused, one that was looking most specifically at trying to reduce VMT. We had one that had assumptions about flexible funding. What if we wrote the rules for how funding works? What would that future look like? And then one that was highway focused. Go to the next slide. And so for me, the results of all of these, each of the 2 MPO boards, I think recognize some things that were agreeable for future assumptions. And then individually, each MPO went back and included certain assumptions that were included in all of those different scenarios, what we called our learning scenarios, in our official alternatives analysis stage of MTP development. And you can see them up on the screen. I'm not going to read through all of those, but just a couple to point out. We looked at some of the assumptions because, even in early 2024, there was still lots of talk about the workforce shifting to teleworking significantly. And so we looked at that over the last year and a half and have included some assumptions about that, even beyond what we have had in the past. Focusing growth in our mobility hubs, our reinvest neighborhoods, and our travel choice neighborhoods. That's where we would assume to have the most transit-oriented development, significant mixed use, and targeting those areas for coordinating with affordable housing investments that are being made out there. So those are just a couple of the highlights. But again, you can see, up on the screen, there are many things that we took away from those learning scenarios and incorporated directly into the MTP development. Go ahead. And where that led us was to really 4 alternatives that we looked at as we stepped through the MTP. The first one, the deficiency and needs scenario, we kind of have to do that. It's unrealistic. It assumes that we get all of the future growth that we are projected to get by, say, the state demographer, but we don't make any new transportation investments beyond what's already on the ground, under construction, or about to go under construction. So really, there's 20 years worth of transportation investment that we pretend like we don't do. And what does that future look like? Now, the reality is, if we cut off funding of transportation, after what's under construction now, at some point, traffic would be so bad that people would begin to move to other regions. So again, it is not a realistic scenario, but it is helpful to have a baseline to compare things against as we step through the rest. So the other 3 scenarios, which we called plans and trends, shared leadership, and all together, are each a combination of a land use set of assumptions that's sort of on the left side of the screen there, and then going along the top, a transportation network. And so we had our community plans, and that is very much what it sounds like. It's the collection and stitching together of all regions, local community, comprehensive, and land use plans. Not a simple or easy thing to do. It takes a lot of work and effort, particularly by your all staff. So if you've ever felt like, maybe hugging a planner, that would be to do, because it takes a lot of effort to do that. Opportunity places, that is essentially a building upon of the locally adopted community plans that I mentioned a few moments ago. It's essentially community plans, but in some very key areas, going above and beyond what those local plans called for. And then the third one down there at the bottom, the build out. And over the years, we have included this in early stages and seem to always screen it out because we realized that we would not build out our regions to the effective, complete 100% use of land within a 30-year period. So we kind of screened that out early on. Along the top, for the transportation investments, starting with the trend, that's where we basically say it's business as usual. The amount of money we get through state and federal funds, what local investment there is, what does that transportation network look like? Mobility corridors, that's where we made some additional assumptions like NC First Commission funding, and a little more flexibility with those funds. And then complete communities where we made additional assumptions, particularly with local and regional future revenue. So the growth that we've had in the region, it's really just under 1.5 million new people that we're anticipating between 2020 and 2055. 2020 was our base year, so the starting point for our planning models. And then for jobs, a little over 1 million new jobs. So that's what we're looking at. How do we accommodate that growth in the future? One of the key things, those places are kind of went above and beyond what locally adopted plans were assuming for the future. We're in our what we called opportunity places. And that really included 4 things: our anchor institutions, areas where we have affordable housing that is already being planned or committed. Our mobility hubs, there's about 24 of those around the region. And then where we have frequent transit and expect, or transit-oriented development. So you can see all those on the map there. Each one's a little bit different flavor of what it is, but all those areas are areas where we looked at increasing capacities and densities and mixed uses in order to support a lot of the transportation investments that would be going in those areas. Ultimately, for our preferred scenario, it has to be fiscally constrained, which means we have to show we have a reasonable assumption of the funding that we need to implement those projects. It's not a wish list. It has to be constrained to that budget that we develop. So we use 3 things there: traditional revenue, so that's really state and federal funds that come through the TIP and the STIP. Most of that money flows through the STI framework. It also is now for the second MTP update, inclusive of our county level transit plan revenue. So the sales tax, registration fee, those things. And then we use a longer term look at local funding, whether it be from bonds or general fund money, or also development activity. So we talk a lot with the local staff to understand what you all are anticipating for what each local jurisdiction might be investing in transportation, but also what the development community might be investing in transportation in your area. In addition to that, we include NC First Commission state revenue assumptions, and we essentially take a fair share of that, which is primarily population based. So we look at what our share of the population is and assume we would get that share in that new revenue. And then the third piece, the additional local or regional revenue. This is where we can get a little creative. In order to make this simple for calculation purposes, we do an equivalent calculation of what a sales tax would generate, but it is not required to be a sales tax. It could be some other funding source. Ultimately, in the plan, we will look at this three or four different ways to show that it's feasible: a sales tax equivalent, property tax equivalent, VMT fee, but we are not limited to those options when it comes to raising the funds in the future. So how that shakes out for the 2 MPOs, Campo is on the left side, Triangle West is on the right side. The additional revenue and NC First Commission funding are the top 2 bars that you see on each side. Pretty much everything left is traditional funding, although local funding is in there, and it is the second and third from the bottom show you where that local funding and developer activity that's anticipated and included in the plan exists. Okay. So that's sort of maybe a little more detailed than we needed to, but talking to you about how we develop the plan, what's in that plan at a very high level, and how we afford that plan. The next few slides are going to be going through some of those key and regional projects that we have that we think are important to the entire Triangle region. So I'm just going to touch on this because Daniel will be doing a presentation in a few minutes that will cover a lot of this, but regional rail, which is the vision for passenger rail improvements throughout the Triangle region and moving forward, and not just serving the core counties, but also moving beyond that. And you'll hear from Daniel that it will require a lot of partnership, especially with NCDOT and eventually Amtrak to make that a reality. And a lot of work that's going on right now and in the next several months to make that happen. Go ahead. But one thing I did want to touch on with this is through the strategic rail implementation study, it has recommended essentially a decision tree to help us prioritize regional investment, local investment, and partnership in a variety of different categories. And I can tell you the first one on the list there, grade crossing eliminations, that pays significant dividends, not just for improving public transportation, but also improving safety throughout the region, and has been a strong priority, I think, for both MPOs over the last 10, 15, 20 years, and will continue in the future. Some of the future next steps and studies, again, Daniel will touch on some of these, but I just wanted to mention them here. There's a lot on our to-do list when it comes to this, and a lot of partnership. And I think it's really important to keep saying that word partnership, but I hope it doesn't lose its importance, because I think the only way forward on regional rail or passenger rail in our region and those improvements is through partnership with NCDOT, with Amtrak, and with each other. Moving on to transit. Some of the key things here are extensions, and I put this slide together, so I apologize if it seems like it's written a little bit from the Campo point of view, but it's not meant to be that. Extensions of those BRT corridors that are under significant project development in Wake County to other areas. So down to Clayton, out to RTP, beyond to Chapel Hill and to Durham. Those are things that are in our regional plan for the future. And it's the idea here is to ensure that we have that our diverse travel market is served by transit in the appropriate way. One of the things that I'm always struck by, even though I see it almost daily, is when you look at trip patterns in our region. It's not everyone coming from outlying areas into one downtown or into RTP. It's everyone kind of going everywhere, which from a transit perspective is challenging to serve. So we continue to look at the best ways to do that. And I think that the 2055 MTP shows 3 decades worth of really good ways to do that. And then of course, BRT and the frequent transit network can help serve that first and last mile solution for the regional rail component. The next thing, Triangle Bikeway. So this is a map of the preferred alignment. It is under project development moving forward. In fact, even yesterday, looking at a few of the alternatives in the Umstead RDU area, Crabtree Park area, and what they're doing there. So it continues to move forward through its project development process, and that effort is continuing to move westward along the corridor. So more to come on that. So if you're wondering what the Triangle Bikeway would be, this is sort of a image of a typical section. So a little bit wider than maybe a traditional greenway or multi-use path, but serving bicycle and pedestrian and probably motor scooters and everything in between in the future, and connecting east to west with a high quality, high capacity bicycle and pedestrian corridor. Moving on to, I guess, technology and other alternative transportation, ideas and options. Our TDM program is a mature program and has been around for over 20 years. The 2 MPOs partner with NCDOT and Central Pines, as well as all of the different TDM providers out there to ensure this program continues to be one of the most cost-effective things we can do to help try and address and reduce VMT growth in the future. And you can kind of see one of the reports, I think this is maybe from last year, showing, if you look real closely at the chart, just the pattern there, you can see that we have had effective reductions in VMT growth for many of the last 10 or 15 years. Go ahead. Moving on to roadway. This map is meant more as a graphic, but you can see the gray background. Those are essentially the CTPs for the MPOs. The brown and blue on the screen, those are those roadway projects that are fiscally constrained in the draft plans over the next three decades. These include major commuting corridors like I-40, US 1, 15501, all of those that you might think of, US 70. They, in particular, are, for this go around, looking at things that can help enhance safety within those corridors, both through design, but also through other means, which will be covered a little bit more when you hear about the safety plan implementation in a few moments. The lower non-freeway roads, I think all have complete street integration included in the assumptions about those future projects and the cross sections and in the project data behind the lines, if you will. The goal there is to help support future land use, access to future land use priorities. So where you all at the local level are going with land use and how that's evolving over time, the idea is that in particular, those local roads will help support that and be multimodal and have good access and connectivity. The last thing there, this MTP is also working on is continuing to advance our efforts to take emerging technology and best practices of those emerging technologies and incorporate them into our transportation system. Go ahead. So one example of that is managed roadways, managed freeways. This is something that we have been working on for a few years now with NCDOT. And the idea is to make in particular, our freeways a lot more efficient, a lot more safer. One of the biggest issues we have here in the Triangle, and I know this is going to sound silly, but we have recurring, non-recurring incidents. And so that's a fancy way of saying we have crashes that are going to happen every day. They don't always happen in the same place. So it's not a question of, oh, that curve in the road needs to be fixed, right? We actually do a pretty good job of identifying those things and getting to work on them. The biggest limitation there is enough funding to deal with those. But there are lots of crash incidents that happen every day in a variety of different places, which makes it challenging to address those through engineering. But this idea, this concept, has the ability for traffic management centers to be able to better manage traffic flow by managing the speed and the use of all of the lanes within that freeway section. And it does it section by section. So if you look at the pictures on the left-hand side, you can kind of see in the foreground and the background, there's multiple signs with either green lights or red X's or something. If you've been out maybe to the Lenovo Center to go to a hockey game or something on Trinity Road, you've seen something like this in practice where across all the lanes of traffic, they have little signs and they light up with green arrows or red X's to tell you can use that lane or not. Imagine that deployed on all of our freeways. And also being able to control speed. So one of the things that they've found over many decades of research is when there is a crash or an incident, maybe it's just a vehicle that broke down in the lane, reducing speed ahead of time and getting traffic to move over ahead of time actually keeps traffic flowing better than everyone speeding up to the choke point, the bottleneck, slamming on their brakes, and then trying to get over, right? So better managing that. So a lot of these technologies have been around for a while and they're getting implemented in other parts of the world and other parts of the country. So it's not as new and emerging as you might think. But one of the more emerging parts is using the in-vehicle technologies that are now becoming more and more standard to have that infrastructure system talking to your vehicle so that you know about these things ahead of time. We have a couple of really good examples of that starting to happen. Town of Cary has worked with NCDOT and the Turnpike Authority to do this at the local street level. So having a connected vehicle project where the street, essentially the intersections, will talk to your phone or your vehicle to tell you when there's an accident, when somebody might be crossing, there might be a pedestrian in the crosswalk, those sorts of things. I think there's 10 or 12 different items that it can actually report out to folks ahead of time, so that you can make good decisions and be prepared. Next slide. So the initial thinking here is that this managed freeway or roadway network would include eventually all of the freeways within the region. Campo has submitted multiple projects into statewide prioritization for different segments of all of our freeways within the 540 loop, and a little bit extending beyond that. And next slide. And then Triangle West, and it sort of crosses the line, but for I-40, there is a project that is in project development right now, and it'll probably be the first project to move forward through RTP and on that main stretch of our shared, Main Street I-40. So these are things that are moving forward, that are happening now, and that are important parts of our transportation future. So in terms of next steps, Triangle West, you've already taken your first step. We'll be taking our step at Campo next month, hopefully. Then we'll go through that conformity and regulatory process and then prepare the final report. And then again, adoptions are tentatively scheduled for January, February timeframe. Unlike local transportation plans or local land use plans, the MTP does have a federal requirement, and it has a deadline. So we have until the end of February to adopt our updates. So we are on schedule to do that. Triangle West is actually a little bit ahead of schedule, which is great. Our plan is to still hit those deadlines. So I think that's the end of the presentation, unless Doug, you had anything else you wanted to throw in there. Otherwise, I guess we can kind of move on to the discussion part and start maybe with any clarifying questions, and then any other discussion that you all may want to have on this.
No, Chris, I think you covered just about everything.
Are there any questions? Yes.
I didn't see that we received this presentation in our package. I may have missed it. I'm a little bit behind an email, but I'd love to get it.
I think that it is posted online, I think in multiple places. But for you, if you go to the Triangle West TPO website, to your meeting calendar, it's there, I know, because that's where I downloaded it very quickly this morning. So it is working there.
Chris, in reference to the slide pertaining to the complete corridors, managed roads, who's the point of contact for Campo to coordinate?
You can contact myself or Alex. Yeah.
Anything else? And we will go to Campo and Triangle West Joint Strategic Rail Infrastructure.
And if I could, with the rest of the speakers, please speak from the lectern. Chris, I couldn't catch you before you started. But this room is very spacious and it echoes, and the microphones are calibrated to pick up from that front center part of the room. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. As I said earlier, I'm Daniel Sproul. I'm with Campo, and I'm here today to present about the strategic rail study, strategic rail infrastructure and investment study that Campo and Triangle West conducted over the past year. I know you've had this in your previous board meetings, as well as the members that are on the joint subcommittee as well. So I'll try not to do too in detail on the actual background and the study itself, and focus on the next steps. There's a lot of interesting stuff happening in the next steps area. So for a little bit of the background, this was a study that was done in FY 2025. HDR was the consultant selected to do the actual work. And in the study, we're going to be going over a little bit of that old information, as well as the next steps and how we're approaching those. As Chris mentioned earlier, these are the service concepts that were developed as part of that plan. These came about from the joint rail subcommittee meeting that was held in December of 2024. And basically asked the members that were at the table to see what their vision of the future was. And it ended up being this, and this is illustrative of the connections. It is not necessarily exactly what we will see. You will see that it has a number of round trips. That is illustrative of connections and the kind of an idea that we would have so we can make the engineering decisions and not decisions, engineering choices during the project. But that begins with the Mebane to Clayton, the Apex Wake Forest, the extension of Apex Wake Forest to include Sanford to Franklinton, Durham to Raleigh, a Lillington to Raleigh, and then the Carver to Raleigh, which is an extension of Concept 4. And on this map, the purple dots are the existing stations in Cary, Raleigh, and Durham, and all the, and Selma and Hillsborough, sorry, Selma and Greensboro. And then the yellow dots are all the proposed stations that are possible. So as a deliverable of this project, we received a project universe that took into consideration a lot of different items for the projects. That includes the eligibility for different federal and state opportunities, and that is based on various engineering and criteria and such, and as well as just general eligibility rules for what makes a good project and how competitive each discrete project to make this network work would be in the various funding opportunities. It is worth noting that the project universe that was created is discrete. It was meant to be an incremental approach. So we have these service corridors, and that was to develop a list of discrete projects of what would it take, the critical path, to build out that network. And that is how we determined that, the section between Raleigh and Cary, that is going to be a high use corridor and is going to need a lot of upgrades. And so from that, we generate that project universe. And you saw this earlier as well. One of the outcomes of this was also the strategic investment decision tree, as well as the local priority list. And that is just, when we are looking at these projects, what are the best bang for the bucks? Grade crossing eliminations are always going to be exceptionally good choices for money, both state, federal, and local money. And a lot of those can be used for the spot process, for instance, to increase scoring for larger quarters as well. Then you have your advanced station work with NEPA engineering studies, protective land purchases for a regional maintenance facility. One of the projects in the project universe includes an acknowledgement that if we wanted to have this large build out system of passenger rail, we would need a maintenance facility in this region. The various interlockings and sidings, ridership studies, and then the investment in the NC line from Burlington to Selma. It also recommended several future studies. The Triangle West, the project matrix and decision tree, when to update it. Hopefully from this study, we will actually start making progress, and in 2-4 years, we might need to update the study to include where are the next study on what next products we need to focus on. Service development plans and quarter ID merger studies. NCDOT and the Federal Railroad Commission actually have a step-by-step process, the service development plan process, to develop a corridor. And this is a merger study on takes the local ideas and how do we incorporate them within the DOT and FRA plans for the larger corridors. Then we have a passenger station register analysis, regional maintenance facility site search, the network rail operation study, station site pre-NEPA planning studies, and then a slow service benefit cost analysis study. Now, all of that has been presented to your previous board members, board meetings, and the joint rail subcommittee meeting. And at the last joint rail subcommittee meeting, there was a request to kind of come back with the actual recommendations and next steps on what we're going to be doing from here on now. So we broke this down into some near-term, midterm, and long-term. For the near term, you can think of that as the next year or so for tasks for the MPOs. Then you have midterm, which is 2 to 5 years, and then long-term are, again, our long-term goals for visiting this full corridor concepts. And the near term, we have submitting projects recommended from the study to Spot 8. There were multiple projects that were in the Spot 8 project list that we submitted, and we are expecting to be getting the scores back on those their state grade projects in January, February timeframe. Secondly is the coordination with Rail Division on upcoming grant opportunities. As we mentioned at the Joint Rail Subcommittee meeting, there is a lot of funding available in passenger rail upcoming. The FRA has a funding opportunity with grants deadline on January 7th for $5 billion in available passenger rail funding. That is a great opportunity, and we are currently working with NCDOT Rail Division on several selection of grant submittals, and are also working on developing a work group with Rail Division to work on those grant submittals, but also on future grant submittals, as we are also expecting many other grant funding opportunities to come online, such as the CRISI program, the RCI Rail Crossing Elimination funding source in the future. So that is a currently in the works development with Rail Division, and we're looking forward to increasing that partnership with the MPO, our MPOs and the Rail Division. Thirdly is the identifying the studies to submit to the next UPWPs for both MPOs. Campo's MPO one call for all projects for our UPWP ends on Friday, and we'll be developing the next list for studies for FY27 over the next few months. And Triangle West will be doing the same. And then third, developing a project recommendation for Wake Transit Plan rail funding. Wake Transit Plan gets called out a little bit separately here in near term because they have or are expecting to adopt in their new Wake Transit Plan bucket of money that is for rail readiness. It's $250 million over the next 10 years. And so we want to go ahead and develop the project recommendations to actually start utilizing and operationalizing that funding to make steps forward on this process. On the midterm, we are looking at strategizing project submissions for P9. P9 will be starting in the next year or two, and we want to make sure that we have a good idea based off of the projects and how they score in P8 with the kind of test projects we put in, to strategize what projects we're going to be putting in for the state funding for the next submittal process. And then coordinating the regional transit plans outside of Wake Transit to align with the study recommendations on how we can regionally approach these plans to create these corridors. And then as a long-term plan, we are continuing to pursue funding of larger rail corridor studies through the recommended grant programs. And this image is just kind of an idea of the life cycle of rail projects on the FRA, Federal Railroad Administration's worldview. Starts with system planning, project planning, and project development. Those first three arrows are kind of where the input from the MPOs is in this process, with the NCDOT corridor ID programs and the rail plans as well. And then the implementation stage of the next three, and by that point, that's kind of where the S line north of Raleigh is right now. And that is all I have for you right now, and I'm happy to answer any questions or discussion on the item.
Thank you, Daniel. Appreciate it. Okay, we'll go to some informational items, spot prioritization.
Good morning, everyone. I am Philip Tassatsian. I'm planner of Triangle West. Alex couldn't make it today. He is unfortunately sick today, and so I'll be presenting snapshots to where we are in the spot process for both our MPOs. This is a quick background. I'm asked to the spot process. So projects are submitted by MPOs, RPOs, and divisions. Each get a set amount of projects to submit, and these projects are divided into categories based off of the project scale. So first we have statewide mobility, which of course covers statewide. Regional impact, which uses 30% of the funds. Usually projects that cross county boundaries is a good way to think about that. And then with our local categories, division needs. Also has the breakdown of the funds for each category. Here is the schedule. So right now we are right over here. We just finished the project submittal window, and we're entering into the data review window. And what other deadline is we were submitting a third of our express design projects. So this is new for P9, and just to reduce the burden on APOs, NCDOT is having us submit the projects we would like to in pieces, third at a time.
Comment?
Yes.
Can you speak up a little bit more?
Yeah, we'll do. So this slide just gives you an idea of our funding availability for this round. We all know what the situation is, but here is just a visual of the different areas that we'll be competing for, as well as the areas that we both will be competing together in. So see, together we are in Division 5, 8, and in Region C, and also Region E. For the next couple slides, I'll be just highlighting some regional projects. And for some, I won't be able to go through list all projects, but I just provide comments on. So first we have a bicycle and pedestrian mode. The project I want to highlight here is the Triangle Bikeway. We submitted the whole section in P7 just as a test run, and that allowed us to submit 2 sections here. One is in Campo and the other is in Triangle West. And also this heads up, that would be how they're differentiated as far as the font. So the color are Triangle West projects, and the blue colors are Campo projects. So next we have the highway. So as you'll see here, not all highways cross in coastal areas. These we want to highlight just due to them being managed motorways. This is where the improvements are actively managed as opposed to just adding capacity in additional lanes. So alternative solutions for lanes and intersections. Next, we have our rail category. And I'm going to highlight all projects except for the first one came directly from the rail study. These were ones that were recommended to have a decent chance at the spot process. So that's what we move forward with. So there's the 2 stations that are in Triangle West, Hillsborough and RTP. And on campus side, they submitted 2 track improvements between Raleigh and Garner and Cary and Raleigh. Next, we have our transit category. So this is the category where we saw our most success as far as what was awarded in P7. And so the bulk of these are the BRT projects between both of our areas. And then other improvements include commuter rail and then bus purchases. So from here on out, since we just finished submitting the projects, we will go into developing our local input methodology. It also requires to be updated every 2 years with the spot process. This will also go out for public comment early next year. The local input assignment will begin in the summer of next year. Be a little after we meet most likely. And so I've also kind of added some next steps, some potential topic discussions for our next meeting. And so since we're meeting spring, those are updates, funding availability, and how we will use any remaining express design allocations. So I'm happy to take any questions on the spot process.
Any questions?
Actually, Philmon, I'm pretty sure that our partners, these Campo, do this too, but we're not just partnering and developing spot submissions with Campo. Could you mention a couple of the other planning organizations that we do projects with?
Yeah, so like I said, not with Campo, but in other directions. So to the north, we have a couple of bicycle pedestrian projects that Kurtar RPO has a group on our behalf, and these are trail projects between STEM and Durham. And then to our west, we have a project coordinating with Burlington Graham APO that is for a potential bus route to go from Burlington all into Carborough.
More questions? Comments?
You take it back a slide to the list of. Yeah, that one. Are these projects we're applying for or that we've historically had in there? Is this a recap of what we did recently?
These are submissions for this current round. There are some that may have overlapping sections with some submittals last go round, as well as some that we're submitting again, which have received funding.
So why are we submitting commuter rail projects? I thought a decision had been taken to move on, and that's why we have the strategic rail investment study underway.
Yeah, I'm confused as that as well.
So from what I understand, Alex isn't here to speak on that, but there are kind of two reasons for that. One is just is a way to kind of game the system. So we know that these will not score well. And so since all projects are relatively scored based off of each other, we know this will help boost the other scores. But aside from that, there are potential groundwork within these projects that can be utilized for real improvements from the study.
I think one of the reasons is the decision point for submitting projects was prior to a final decision on moving on to the regional rail concept. So the choice was really submit something for rail, passenger rail, or submit nothing. Those 4 commuter rail projects that are shown on the screen there, probably unlikely that they're going to get funded in this next round of prioritization. But we will certainly learn something from the data that we get from the submissions, which will help us in our next round of prioritization.
Anything else? Thank you very much. Okay. Safety plan.
Good morning.
Morning.
I'm Colleen McHugh, Planning Manager for Triangle West, and
I'm Kenneth Withrow, Capital Area MPO's Transportation Plan.
so we're going to talk with you a little bit about the implementation that we've been working on for our safety action plans. Triangle West adopted our safety action plan earlier this year in April. Since then, we've been working on several different planning activities. Working closely with supporting some of our members with their Safe Streets for All funding applications, and also working behind the scenes on some data analysis. But the main thing I want to share with you all today that we've been working very hard on is our second annual Regional Safety Summit. So this was something we started last year while we were in the process of putting together our safety action plan. And we received such positive feedback on it. We wanted to continue the momentum that we built during the safety action planning process. This year, we're bringing in an internationally renowned speaker, Veronica Davis, who is going to be talking about inclusive transportation, which is one of her books. We'll have copies of her book for all attendees. And we're going to be hosting this next month at the Chapel Hill Library on November 20th from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Just a little bit about what we will be talking about at this year's summit. Now that we have an adopted safety action plan, our sessions will really be focused on some of the different implementation components of that action plan. So we are partnering with UNC Highway Safety Research Center. They will be helping us to facilitate some small group discussions to talk about implementation. What are we doing with the different strategies and actions in the Triangle West plan? Here's a little QR code. If you're not registered yet, we'd love for you to register. I think we have over 100 people registered at this point. So we look forward to seeing you there. And I'll turn it over to Kenneth.
All right, can you go back to that screen? So
yeah, you're right. I should leave the QR code up for a little while longer. Back. There we go. And I'll step to the side.
There we go. There we go.
We have until November 7th.
Thank you.
One thing I did not mention, but Chapel Hill is providing some e-bikes. So there will be an optional e-bike tour of Chapel Hill after the meeting. So if you'd like to register for that, when you go to the QR code, there should be an opportunity to register. QR coded.
Thank you, Colleen. Again, I'm Kenneth Withrow, Senior Transportation Planner with the Capital Area Metropolitan Planning Organization. And along with what is occurring in Triangle West, the MPO just adopted our blueprint for safety on June 18th. And we're beginning the exercise of really implementing the blueprint for safety that was created. As a result, we're going to have our inaugural Blueprint for Safety Summit on Wednesday, December 3rd. It'll be hosted at the Wake County Commons in Raleigh. And our key speaker or keynote person that will be speaking will be Dr. Laura Sant. She has been involved in many things associated with safety, bicycle and pedestrian safety, safe routes to school safety for many years, going as far back as if we look at early pedestrian safety planning back in the 2010s, 2013s. She has been engaged with that. And what we will be doing at that event will be talking about the local plan reviews that have been conducted and completed by the town of Knightdale and what is being completed by the city of Raleigh. Beyond that, what will occur is in the Blueprint for Safety Summit, we have some specific pillars that were created in terms of tasks we're attempting to accomplish. We've broken those pillars up into two task force groups. They are policy and culture, along with projects. The persons that are going to be managing and chairing these projects are, of course, here in our facility right now, or most of them are here. For policy and culture, Lucy Garcia, she could not be here, did not present a picture, but she did want to present the town of Youngsville. Caleb Allred is a staff liaison who will be serving with that particular group. Steve Morgan, who is with the town of Knightdale, will serve as chair for the projects task force, and Mr. Evan Koff will serve as chair for that particular group. I wish to thank Mr. Jacob Irving for his work along with Shelby Powell in putting this together in terms of the table and how we're going to work this out over the coming years. And again, I must stress that it's going to be a paradigm shift from what we've been historically doing in this region in terms of planning. Beginning in the 2000s was mainly roads, then it became bicycle, pedestrian really integrated, then transit, and now safety. And so this is very important. We invite you all to come to this event. It is important for you all. I'd like for you all to see the QR code that is associated with signing up for the inaugural summit. And so far, I believe we have over 20 people that have signed up thus far for that. And you can register online by November 19th. We know that there have been over 579 emails or broadcasts out to various groups inviting them to participate in this summit. So we have the Triangle West Summit, we have the Campo Summit. So we see the importance of how safety is going to impact this region and how we want to make this a livable community based on safety and how people can access transportation systems we have in a safer manner. So without any further ado, are there any questions? Let me point out one last thing. On November 7th, there will be the Triangle Bicycle Pedestrian Workshop. We'll be featuring safety at that event there. Yours truly, as well as Colleen and others, will be speaking at that event associated with safety as well. And we'll be hearing from the Charlotte area as it relates to funding. So we look forward to not signed up for that. We'd love for you all to come out to that event as well. So thank you all very much.
Where's that event again?
That event is going to be, thank you, in the town of Holly Springs at the Holly Springs Cultural Center, 300 Valentine Street in Holly Springs.
Any questions or comments? Yes.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Why aren't we doing it together? Summit.
Great question. Now, I know we had discussed that, the potential for that earlier this summer, and we decided at this point, because we have separately adopted safety action plans so that we can each kind of focus on the implementation of our own at this point, but that's a potential for next year. Maybe we will host it together.
Are our safety plans drastically different?
I mean, not necessarily. We actually had the same consultants develop both of
like
our
that.
action plans.
But don't you, don't
They're
you?
focused on each of our member jurisdictions.
We can connect and try to look for some synergetic opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, my preference would be, I mean, I would love to go to the Campo one, but I don't, you know, like, I'm gonna pick the one that I'm in, and I think that's what a lot of folks are going to do, especially electeds who have, you know, lots of things on their plates and limited time. So my ask would be for a fall, I'm really glad we're doing this. This has been something that, the West TPO has really been pushing. And hopefully moving forward, we can figure out how to do it. And I think that we're here together to work regionally. So that would be my desire. Thank you.
Along with what she's just mentioned, both Triangle West will be at the summit in Campo, and Campo will be represented at the Triangle West. So there is that cooperation, and we will make sure there is some synergetic exercises in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, what else do you want to talk about today? Oh, y'all are not very talkative today. Okay, well, thank you very much for coming, and we'll see you next time. We are adjourned. Bye now.